I think rugby has had the biggest influence in my professional career than anything else. It's a character building activity. College doesn't provide you that. And today, actually, knowledge is almost commoditized. So you go into YouTube and you get the, whatever education you want. You have to really develop resilience. You have to really develop character and dealing with the situations as a business person in the real world.
Marcos, it is such a pleasure to have you on Business of Sport. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure to be here, guys.
Now, I would love to start with a little bit of context because you are a rock star founder. You're one of the greatest technology founders of the last decade or two. And now the move into sport. Why did you decide that now was the time to move into sport and you wanted to buy a sports team?
Well, I've always loved sports. I've been a sports person all my life. Actually, when I was admitted to the University of Pennsylvania, I was also offered the chance to join the junior national rugby team in Argentina, and I had to make up my mind. I went for studying. So I've always had a little bit of what would my life had been had I followed a different path. But I love sports, and the Miami opportunity appeared, and that's why I did it this time. I think when I was starting the company, I obviously didn't have any time to do anything like this.
You say the Miami opportunity appeared. How does that come about? Like, how does that even happen?
Yeah, well, as someone I know from the business world, who's also a rugby fan, he came with the idea of buying the franchise. It's an expansion franchise, so it's a new franchise. He knew I loved rugby. I said, yeah, why not?
How much does one pay for an expansion franchise in rugby?
We paid almost $7 million.
$7 million. Does one pay in like upfront cash? Is it installments?
I think that's a negotiation between the Major League Rugby and whoever is buying. So each expansion is a different negotiation. We had a contest, so there was more than one group that wanted to buy the franchise. So probably we couldn't negotiate that much.
What was it about this opportunity that really sold it to you? I'm sure you've had opportunities before to buy into teams and clubs in the sport.
Not really. This was the first time, but the reason why I decided to go ahead is I really like rugby. It's a sport that I practice myself. It's a sport that I enjoy. I think it's a sport that is growing a lot. It's a very popular sport in Argentina and in Uruguay, the second most popular, I would say. And the US is going to be hosting the Rugby World Cup in 2031. So I think that rugby has an opportunity to grow a lot. I used to play rugby in the US when I was in college there. And rugby has been growing in the US, although it's obviously a minor league. But in general, sports leagues, the value of sports leagues have been going up dramatically. We saw what happened to football, European football, not American football, in the US, soccer, what happened to the soccer league, and how prices went up there. It took a long time. It took maybe at least 20 years. But definitely the prices of the franchises came up a lot in the US. And we believe there's an opportunity that something like that could happen with rugby as well. It's an action sport, has a lot of scoring. It's very fun to watch, has a lot of contact, has a very good atmosphere around the field. The fans love it. I think the brands like the type of fans that go to the stadium. So I think it's a big opportunity. Obviously, it's a challenge and it's going to take time. But we thought that it was a good opportunity.
Marcos, you're an incredible CEO. The best CEOs are the best resource allocators. We often have this debate with sports team owners, which is like, is owning a sports team a good investment, or is it a passion project that one is happy to invest in because they love the mission, the sport?
Yeah.
As a businessman and as a financial mind, do you think that investing in owning a sports team is a good financial decision, potentially?
I think, it depends what league you're talking about and what team, etc. I think, as I was saying, I think in the US it's a risky investment. As an entrepreneur, I'm very much used to to diving deep into risk and trying new things and risky things. I think it's not an obvious thing that it will be a success, but I think it has chances of being a very big success in a couple of decades as the value of sports franchises and sports content continues to go up. I think that will continue to happen. You have the streaming platforms bidding for sporting rights and bidding up the prices of sporting rights. Obviously, at the moment, it's mostly the major leagues that are benefiting big time. But at some point, I think that those prices will be so high that the big streaming platforms will start looking at alternatives. And also, I think the amazing thing about the internet is that it enables each sport to find its audience and its niche. So in that way, I think that's also a great opportunity for smaller leagues. So yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting ride.
How much does the franchise system allow you as an investor to kind of get a bit of security within that investment? We have a lot of chats on here with rugby conversations where we've looked at the struggles the game has gone through in England and other markets, and a lot of that actually comes down to the structure of these leagues. Does the franchise model in the US for you give you confidence this is something that's going to succeed?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's also one of the reasons why I decided to do this. It's because I really like the way sports is organized in the US. It's really different. It's very capitalistic on one hand, and on the other hand, it's very socialistic because each franchise is an equal member of the league, and many of the league revenues are divided equally among the franchises. For example, ourselves as a new franchise, we had the right to get the first drafts from the college athletes. So it's like set up in a way that the games are very fun to watch because anyone can win. There's quite a lot of parity in the level of the teams. There's a certain amount that each team can pay in terms of salaries, and you cannot go over that. So it's different to, for example, how soccer is in Spain, that you have two clubs that always win kind of every tournament, or in Germany, or maybe even in the UK. This is much more like the rugby league in the US is modeled after the soccer league or even the major league, the National Football League. So I think that's a great way to organize professional sports, and it's obviously been incredibly successful for the US in terms of American football and basketball and now even soccer. So that structure is one that I felt was very attractive.
What's the business decision-making process like within the league? Is it quite centralized? Do the league negotiate a lot of contracts, whether it's merchandise, media, the sponsorships, or do the clubs have a lot of ownership over the business that they can run as well?
Yeah, each franchise has ownership on its region, so you can negotiate the broadcasting rights for your region, sponsorship for your region, and obviously ticketing and merchandising, right? But then the league takes care of the national sponsors, the national broadcasting, and sets up the rules for what's a salary cap and those type of things. So some things are centralized, some things are done locally. I think in general I was very impressed at the level of rugby that is played in the US. It's incredible to see, how many people from all over the world want to go and play rugby in the US. You have a lot of South Africans, a lot of people from Samoa, Tonga, Fiji living in the US. You have all these communities. You have a lot of Welsh people, Scottish people, Irish people. So you have players from all over the world. And the level of play is really high. I wasn't expecting to see. We had a great team, and we didn't make it to the playoffs. We thought we were going to be able to, even though we had some great games and we won some great matches. Like for example, we beat the last year's and actually this year's champion. We beat them on the regular season, but we didn't make it to the playoffs. The level of rugby is quite high. It's very intense. It's very physical. On the other hand, obviously we have a lot of Latin American players as well that we brought to Miami. On the other hand, I think there's a big opportunity in terms of sponsorships and national sponsorships. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement there.
What do you think the improvement there is to be made, and how could that get a lot better?
Well, I think we need to do better in terms of getting the league known by the major brands and signing them up as sponsors. I think in terms of sponsorship revenues, the league is still very much a startup, and so I was very impressed at the level of rugby, at the competitiveness of the league. It's a serious league in that sense. But in terms of revenues, when you look at how much revenues teams generate in the UK, for example, in the Premiership, it's much higher than in the US, despite the US being a much bigger market. And so I think there's a big opportunity there.
What do the revenues look like in owning, say, the Sharks?
They're small. I don't know. This is a private company, but it's less than $10 million. So really small revenues. I think revenues for English clubs are like in the $20 to $30 million. I think in general, when you talk to people, even in the US and even in, for example, in soccer, that has been a very successful league, particularly recently with Messi and all that, like a third of the clubs lose money, a third kind of break even, and a third make money. But it's not uncommon. I would say it's quite common that franchises lose money on an operational basis. And basically what's happening is that the value of the franchise is going up because the sport is growing, the broadcasting rights are going up, and all these things are happening. But you still have to put money every year.
Is that the business of owning sports teams, though? Which is like, I'm just thinking as a business guy, is it a sucker punch of 3 million a year losses, but the enterprise value of the business will be 2, 3, 5, 600?
I think it depends a lot on how each franchise is run and managed. So some people, want to have the best players or the best facilities, and they are into that. Other people, I think we are in the other category, want to try and minimize the burn rate as much as possible and try to run a very tight ship and try to minimize losses as much as possible and potentially even make money. And you have I think both situations. Not in Major League Rugby. In Major League Rugby in the US right now, everybody is losing money.
What are the biggest revenue drivers? Say, when you think about ticketing, you think about merchandise, you think about player sales. What's the biggest revenue driver today?
So ticketing is important. Broadcasting rights, which are typically the biggest, the most important, are not important for Major League Rugby because it's still a small sport. So basically, you don't get the large broadcasters or the streaming platforms bidding to get the rights. So I think that's going to be a big change when that happens. Right now, it's mostly ticketing and sponsorship.
What do you think needs to happen to get those media deals? When you say when that changes?
I think rugby needs to continue growing in terms of audience. And I think we need to continue engaging the platforms and the brands to put rugby into the conversation. I think there's a big opportunity. If I were a platform, I would definitely look into it because I think it's a big opportunity in terms of audience and value. I mean, when you see how much they are bidding for other sports and many times losing, you say, yeah, so for a fraction of that, you can get a sport like rugby, which has an amazing audience, and brands really feel very comfortable with this audience. And I think at some point that is likely to happen if we do things well, as a franchise and also at the league level.
How do you think about like the attention economy, Marcos? When you think about like the ability to gain consumer attention and time, women's football is increasingly trying to make its way into mainstream media. MLS has tried for years. You have emergent sports like paddle and 15 others.
Yeah.
You are one of 20 sports trying to find that and win that attention economy.
Yeah. I think there's a chance for everyone with the internet because of this ability to really reach everyone, and everyone has an audience. I think rugby in particular is an amazing sport. It's a global sport. It has a World Cup that is attended by literally millions of people. It's played globally. It has a sevens component that is also an Olympic sport, and it's quite popular. The U.S. Won the bronze medal actually now in France. I think that was very good for rugby in the U.S. So I think it will continue to grow, and it will continue to compete with other leagues. It's going to be a challenge, but it's going to be an interesting challenge. I think that's what makes it more fun. But again, I think the characteristics of rugby, the fact that it's an action sport with a lot of scoring and a lot of contact and a team sport, I think it makes it a very good sport for parents to have their kids play. I always say this. I think rugby has had the biggest influence in my professional career than anything else, even more than going to Wharton School or Stanford University, because competing as a team is something that is really difficult to. It's a character building activity, really big time. It's like joining the Marines. You have to really develop resilience. You have to really develop character. You have to you realize that many times unfair things happen, that the ref is unfair, that when you're playing away, the crowd is tough and rough, and you have to put up with it. And that is really a character building situation, and college doesn't provide you that. And today, actually, knowledge is almost commoditized. You go into YouTube and you get the lectures from MIT, from Harvard, from Stanford. You can choose. You can get whatever education you want over the internet, but you cannot get this type of education that is really important for building leadership and dealing with the situations that then you have to deal with as a business person if you are successful, and even if you're not successful when you go and try to do something in the real world.
Marcos, what are the biggest costs in running a sports team? If those are the revenue drivers, when you think about the outgoings, what are the biggest costs?
Well, player salaries, definitely. Insurance is also another one. A stadium, getting the venue is expensive, very expensive.
Do we have salary caps in the MLR now?
Yes, there are salary caps.
And the salary caps are what?
It's $700,000 for 6 months. So not that much.
Wow, that's not much. When you think about a team of 15 people plus subs.
No, I would say teams of 35.
30, yeah.
Yeah, 35.
Respectfully, how can those players do that as a full-time job if there's potentially $50,000 a year and they have to live in?
Then you pay housing and transport in addition to that. So that is so you have the salary cap, then you have the housing and the car on the separate. And this is again for 5 months. You don't have that many millionaires rugby players, unfortunately. Hopefully we will get there someday, but it's not a sport where players make that much money yet.
But you're a new team. You're coming into the rugby landscape. You're trying to attract really good players. You've got Thomas Kubeli coming in there as well. Yeah. Very successful player from Biarritz, and you're trying to compete in a package. How do you sell that to the players? What are they really coming for? Where's the draw for them?
Well, I think the fact that we had a team with great players like Kubeli, who played over 90 caps in the Argentine national team, gave players a sense that we really were trying to build a team where quality rugby is played. The fact that Miami is a great city to live in was also helpful. The fact that we played in the Inter Miami stadium, it's not the one where they play soccer, it's next to it, it's where they train. So we had to build the stands and everything, but we now have a great stadium. I think people appreciated that as well. So it's a combination, that where they will be living. We had a great place for everyone to live together with pool and gym, etc., close to the beach. So I think it's a combination of aspects and obviously the money that they will make.
Are you riding the Inter Miami wave? Do you feel that is playing a big influence in kind of pairing up and attracting people to the sport, just being associated in and around that club?
I think it has been great for Miami, for sure, but it has also brought up costs and living expenses. And Miami right now is Florida in general and Miami in particular are going through a boom. So housing is very expensive, and getting cars, all those things have driven up our costs in that way. On the other hand, I think as I was saying before, players enjoy living there and training in this stadium and competing in the stadium.
What's the biggest unexpected cost, Marcos?
Time.
One that you didn't.
I didn't expect to invest so much time in this activity, but by far, I mean, I love it. I have a passion for rugby. I didn't expect to have so much fun. I didn't expect to invest as much time, to be honest. When I agreed to do this, I thought it was going to be like another investment. I've done many investments in addition to my activity as a founder and CEO of Mercado Libre, but I've really been involved. I spent a lot of my weekends just watching the games and talking to the coach and talking to players and talking to my partners in the franchise. So I think we're investing a lot of time.
Do you think rugby teams and sports teams are owned and run professionally enough? When we look at especially a lot of the sports teams out west, they're still owned by billionaires and not run like great modern businesses. As a businessman, do you think that these teams are run as efficiently and effectively as possible?
Well, I think, as I was saying, I was very impressed at how the league has been formed, at the competitiveness, all the sports aspect of the league. I think has been incredible. I didn't expect it to be that well run. I think we have an opportunity in terms of increasing our revenues and driving audience and getting the value that I think we can get from broadcasters and streaming platforms and just national brands. So I think there's an opportunity there. But it's a relatively new league. I think we're on the 7th year. So I think it's natural that it takes some time. And also, as you were saying before, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of other sports out there. So I would say, in terms of how professional it is run, I think in the U.S., sports in general is run by far in the most professional way. Obviously, I still think that there's room for improvement.
You mentioned there that rugby players, we don't have a lot of like the very kind of notable, rich, we say global sports stars like you do in other sports.
Yeah.
A great way for you and some clubs, to be able to build profile is to be able to leverage some of the people within that organization, build brands around the players as well as the team.
Yeah.
Is this something that you think, and then particularly you mentioned, the US and the Sevens, and you look at what Ilona Maher's done over there with her, TikTok presence now being so dominant. Is making stars out of your players, building their brand, something that you'll look to do to try and elevate the profile of Miami Sharks as a team as well?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. We're trying to do that using social networks and trying to leverage our stars. We have, as I was saying before, a lot of very well-known Latin American players, Argentines, Uruguayan, Chileans. There's a very large Latin American community in Miami, and they like to go on the weekend to watch their players. There's also a very large South African community in Miami, northern Miami, and we have a couple of South African players as well, so they come to see their guys over the weekends. So I think we're making progress, but there's a lot of room to continue improving.
What do you think you need to improve most on from here?
Well, I think we had a lot of learnings in this first season in terms of the game, in terms of the team, in terms of the staff. We, in addition to the 35 players, we have like a 10-people staff with doctors and coaches and video experts and all sorts of professionals. So we have a lot of learnings. How we manage the game day is something that you really need to learn it to bring the crowds. That the crowds have a great time before and after the game. They like to do tailgating activities, having the right merchandising for them, the right food and beverage. All those things generate revenues, but are also very important for the fans. So I really think that on the next year, on our second season, we're going to do a much better job because we've learned a lot.
I guess when you're putting executives together in a team there, and it's quite a new industry, they're learning as much on the job as possible. Did you pull people in from other sports to come and help run the organization, to bring across those like best practices?
Initially we did, but it didn't work out that well for us. So we ended up with just a team that we built from scratch. People we knew from Miami, people we knew from rugby in Latin America. We brought players from all over the US and from all over the world, really. We have a couple of Welsh players who played for the Welsh national team, our prop and our hooker, a Welsh player. So we have players from all over the world. First inside center is a Scottish guy who played for the national team as well. So, bringing all these nationalities together and making them understand the coach and vice versa, understanding what type of game we want to play is a big challenge, particularly in the first year.
When we spoke to Ryan Smith, who owns the Utah Jazz and the founder of Qualtrics, he said, when it comes to budget, it's kind of like what my wife will let me get away with. My question to you is, when you think of like annual budget that you're willing to get hit with, do you say like, okay, I'm willing to lose X amount a year, but I'm going to block it there? Because otherwise the cash taps can just keep flowing. Well,
there's a limit here because remember, you have a cap in terms of salary. In other sports, like you have a cap in terms of salary, but you have some exceptions, right? So for example, in soccer, you have a cap, but you can sign up, I think it's three people outside of the cap. So there you can spend whatever you want on this. So that's how Inter Miami brought Messi. It's not like that in rugby. You have a cap. So everybody kind of spends similar amount. You might decide to make a huge investment and build a stadium, which could be a very good business idea because then you can use a stadium for many purposes, right? Not just for the rugby. So that's sometimes also a part of the business that clubs do, not only in rugby, particularly I would say in other sports, the real estate of the stadium ends up being a big part of the business rationale.
Will you do that? Will you look to build a rugby specific stadium?
At the moment. We are renting our pitch there with Inter Miami, and I think that's a plan for the near future.
What do you know now that you wish you had known when you bought the team? If I say, Marcos, you can call yourself up the night before you buy it. What do you know now that you wish you'd known then?
Well, I suspected that I was going to have fun with this. I really didn't know it was going to be so much fun and so addictive. It really is it's a passion. It's a dangerous passion because, as a businessman, you like competing. At the end of the day, it's part of running a business. But I think in the sports world, competition is at its purest form. It's very, although there's still a lot of injustices with the ref and the lineman and these things. But I think it's competition at its purest form. And,
it's also very real time. Like you consistently see every week win or lose.
Yeah, when I can be in the stadium, I'm watching this on the TV. My neighbors think I'm crazy. Like I'm screaming and jumping and going. People cannot believe that I go so crazy just watching a rugby game. I suspected that, but I can confirm that it's really fun and a passion. I also suspected that it was going to be challenging, and I confirm it has been really challenging. And I think we've lost more money than what we would have liked to, and I think we had a lot of learnings, in this process with respect to where we play, how much we pay for the fields, where we train, how much we pay for that, where we live, how much we pay for that, the crowds that come in, how much we pay for organizing the game day activities. And I would say I'm also very thankful with the sponsors that we had. We have amazing sponsors, Visa, JP Morgan, some Argentine financial institutions like Bind and Black Toro. So we've had great sponsors. That was actually a very positive surprise. I didn't expect us as a team, as a franchise, to be so successful. And we were very successful at really signing up quality sponsors that have been very supportive.
Why do you think those companies have particularly seen an interest in sponsoring?
I I
the
think we
team?
were successful at explaining to them the opportunity of rugby in the US, what happened with soccer, the fact that the World Cup is going to be played in the US in 2031, how big of a sport rugby is around the world. You know, the Rugby World Cup was played last year in France. It was a huge event, you know, sold out stadiums all the time. So there are not that many sports where you have this type of situations and at the prices that you can get, right? When you compare the prices of sponsoring a franchise in any other sport in the US, it's a huge opportunity. It's really a very little money for the opportunity to perhaps really, you know, build something very big.
Do you also feel like you had a really clear identity when you came in as well? Because you mentioned the strong like South American community in there. You look at some of the players you brought in.
Yeah.
Do you think that made it really easy for brands to relate straight away and go, we know where this team is. We know who we're speaking to.
Yeah, that's true. We have a very clear identity in that sense. I mean, we have people from all over the world, but we clearly are a team in Latin America, in Miami, where there's a very strong Latin American community, and we want to have a good representation of Latin American players as well, you know, and the type of rugby that we play, I think also represents that, and our coach is also Argentinian, and I think that's also a little bit the play that the Major League Rugby did with us as well. You know, Major League Rugby has a team in San Diego that attracts lots of people from the Pacific Islands and Australia and New Zealand. You have a team in Boston that attracts lots of players from, you know, Europe and particularly the UK. So this is the amazing thing about the United States. You know, it's such a big country with communities from all over the world, and I think that plays to the strength of the league in that sense.
Do you think these kind of hits to sports sustain? And I'll give examples being Messi moving to Miami. Does that sustain an MLS team and division? The Rugby World Cup, a hit to the sport in the US, does that sustain a trend of playing rugby? Do these short-term hits create sustained behaviors or not?
They can. If you execute well around those situations, then definitely they have staying power. If you just rely on that, it's not magic, you know. So it's very important to work around these things. I think per se, just stand alone, it's not enough. But definitely they are very helpful.
A big part of this, I think we talk about this quite a lot when we're looking at, from a fan's perspective, the accessibility of some of these live sporting events and making them affordable and engaging for audience. I can't remember who it was Harry was speaking to previously, but he was talking about, I think, a baseball game for a family of four now, or an NFL game. You know, you're spending hundreds of dollars just for a family of four to go to one of these games. And for you, trying to bring people into the stadium, how do you look at like pricing the product now to get that really great community like engaged within it and make it affordable?
Yeah, it's $25 to watch a rugby game, and people love it. I mean, the feedback that we get from fans when they leave the stadium, it's just amazing. They love it. They're very impressed. They didn't expect it to be so much fun. They didn't expect it to be so much action oriented, high intensity. I mean, these are big athletes, you know, rugby players. These are big professional athletes, and the stadium is, you know, the stands are really close to the field. So it's really fun to watch it. When I'm there, I'm really impressed at the intensity of the game. I think it's a great opportunity, and we have obviously being in Miami, there's a big party after the game, and people stay until midnight. Dancing until midnight. I would say one of the characteristics of our franchise is that the fans stay. Rugby has, you know, what we call the third half. It's played in two halves. At least in Argentina, the third half is very popular. That is a moment when players get together after the game and they share a beer and have dinner together. That's a tradition of how rugby is played club rugby is played in Argentina and in Uruguay. And we took that tradition over to the Major League Rugby, and after the game, you know, the players stay and have a drink. There's beers and there's burgers, and the fans join them. And it ends up, obviously being Miami, it ends up being a huge party, and people stay until midnight just dancing and enjoying. And that's also when we sell a lot of merchandise and a lot of food and beverage. It's also great business, and fans love it.
That's something that's something I didn't expect about doing this show. Is like the importance of the experience around the game for the business of these teams.
It's incredibly important.
And keeping people after the game is something that, Marcos, that very few teams can do well. Most often, they'll get you before for a beer, but afterwards, you leave. And that's their challenge.
We have a huge party after the game, and the fans and players are there, and it's a great time.
Marcos, can I ask, do you welcome the increasing participation of private equity, of big financial houses into sports divisions and leagues? Do you think that's great? Or do you think that actually dehumanizes, makes it more challenging for these teams to operate efficiently?
I would say capital is very much needed because, as we were saying before, in the rugby league, all the franchises are losing money, so capital is required. I think there's a big opportunity for private equity firms to add a lot of value because this discipline in terms of bringing sponsors and making sure the sport is known, and particularly if they have other sporting assets around the world, they can bring learnings from different sports or different franchises that they might have in the same sport in other parts of the world. There's a lot of synergies to be had there. So I welcome that. I think it's useful. I'm a capitalist, so I'm all in for capital allocation and capital joining sports. And I think that if you see what has happened in other professional leagues, the more professional capital that has come in, the better it has been for the players, for the game, and for everyone involved.
It's the NFL still there. It's interesting because they've always prevented really the private equity money coming in to do exactly that. So it's when that starts to shift as well, and you start seeing the values.
I mean, it's shifting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's shifting and it will continue to shift. I mean, the NFL has undergone a big transition. It continues to transition in that sense, and the values of the teams, make it that I think more and more private equity firms, or I don't know, and maybe even other type of capital institutions will enter the sport.
Was there much of a process when you bought the club of them checking you were the right people to take this franchise on, rather than obviously just being the capital?
There was more than one group trying to get the franchise. So there was a contest and there was a lot of background checking, etc.
Should we do a quick fire, Charlie?
Let's do it.
Okay, so Marcos, what's the hardest element of owning a sports team?
Losing.
Does it? Do you have the parties afterwards if you win or you lose?
Yeah, we do. We do have the parties afterwards. I would say losing and watching it on TV is the hardest part.
Out of the sports kind of in and around you, who are the competitors, do you think, for your eyeballs the most? Which sport are you competing with in the US?
I don't think we're really competing head on to any sport. We are really small. I mean, rugby is very similar to American football, right? But we played on a different time frame. So when rugby finishes, American football starts and vice versa. So that was done on purpose. American football fans, it's great once there's no more football to go and watch rugby because it's a very similar sport in the sense that it's a team sport, has a lot of action, a lot of tackles, a lot of contact. And also some of the rules are similar. But obviously we don't compete with American football because of the timing difference, the calendar difference, but also because of the how big they are and how small we are.
What's the same and what's different between being CEO of an incredible company like Mercado Libre and then owning a sports team?
Nothing is the same. Everything is different. This is a startup, right? And I mean, it's more like what Mercado Libre was 25 years ago when we were just starting out. I mean, the other thing that is very different is the ability to scale. I mean, once again, I have fallen in love with the fact how Mercado Libre can scale, at over 100 million users and growing, 30% year on year. It's a really compounding growth at that rate is almost magical. It's much harder to do it at a startup level in rugby. Stadiums don't scale as much and players don't scale. It doesn't scale as much.
Or is it just those early years being tougher? Does it reach that inflection? Do you see what I mean? Like you go back to the early years where it's like the first year, I'm sure, with Mercado Libre.
No, definitely. But even I look at, very successful NFL franchises, and they don't scale as much, right? You have so many fans, and it doesn't scale as much as the internet. The internet the power of growth of the consumer internet is amazing.
Marcos, I'm going to give you are the chairman of World Rugby for one day. What do you do? What's the one thing you do?
Only one.
Only one day.
This is the type of interview questions I do myself. I would.
That's good.
I think they're going in that direction, but I would drastically alter global competition. These test windows of test matches that they have, it doesn't make any sense. You need to create a global league and have a global competition rather than this. The Six Nations on the one hand, then you have the Rugby Championship on the other side. You have all these different. You have these test matches that are played. I think that is how it used to be done in the old days. But you need to create a global league. I think that's imperative.
Marcos, what's your favorite interview question? You said that's the type of question you ask. Is there any way you're like, I love to ask this and I find it very revealing?
It's a secret. I typically ask, if you would have a magic wand, and you could choose three things, what would you do with that? What would you do with that wand? What three things would you ask for? And those are, for me, revealing in the sense that I kind of realize how a person is, what they appreciate, what it's important for them. It doesn't have a right or a wrong answer. It just gives me a good way to get to know whoever I'm interviewing. Now you cannot ask that question to me.
In 10 years' time, Marcos, success. What is success for you with Miami in 10 years' time if we do this show in 2034?
Oh, we have our own stadium, 30,000 people, packed stadium every time we play. We have a great team. We've won a few championships. The Major League Rugby is maybe a 24-team league rather than 12. Yeah, rugby is a big sport in the US. We have broadcasting rights. We have long-term partnerships with the biggest streaming companies in the world, and players make a lot of money, and rugby is watched by hundreds of millions of people all over the world.
Marcos, listen, I can't thank you enough for joining us today.
Charlie, it was very nice to meet you. Harry, great to see you again, and let's keep in touch.